Hello everyone, I'm Chris, and this is a full recap of The Nun, released in 2018. If you end up enjoying this video and want to see more from us, then make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to know anytime we upload a new video. Ever since the release of The Conjuring a decade ago, the Conjuring Universe has continued to expand in ways few could have predicted at the time, with the franchise now consisting of 8 films, including 3 Conjuring films, 3 Anabelle films, 1 film focusing on the Curse of La Llorona, and 1 film on The Nun, which we'll be covering today. Although the franchise's 5th installment, The Nun actually takes place first chronologically, and serves as a deeper look into the demon Valak's history, who'd made their first appearance in the franchise in The Conjuring 2, released in 2016, since which the character has proven capable of drawing in tons of fans, as the 2 films in which Valak served as the main antagonist have gone on to make more money at the box office than any of the other 6 films in the franchise, with The Nun actually bringing in the most of them all at $363 million worldwide. So before we get started with our recap, you should make sure, if you haven't already, to go watch The Nun, which will be linked in the description so you can form your own opinions on it. But if you have seen it and are just looking for a quick refresher, then you come to the right place. The movie opens in 1952 Romania at the St. Carta Monastery, inside of which we see 2 Roman Catholic nuns, Sister Jessica and Sister Victoria, slowly approaching a door that reads, "God ends here," which Sister Jessica claims they have no choice but to enter. So she makes her way inside as Sister Victoria prays, but unfortunately, Jessica ends up being attacked and ultimately killed by an unseen evil. Although just before she's killed, she's able to inform Victoria that this evil needs a vessel in order to escape. So to prevent the evil from overtaking her, Sister Victoria sacrifices herself via hanging out the window. It takes some time for the Vatican City to learn of anything that took place here, but they eventually do when a delivery man who goes by the nickname Frenchie arrives at the Abbey and finds Sister Victoria's decaying body hanging there. So the Vatican's officials call in Priest Father Burke to investigate the monastery and determine if the grounds are still holy. For his mission, the Vatican also recommends a young novitiate from London named Sister Irene to accompany him, claiming she's familiar with the territory. Although when Father Burke later meets with her, she claims that she's never been to Romania. Still though, Burke decides to press forward with her alongside him, believing every decision that the Vatican makes is with purpose. And the 2 next head over to Birtan to meet with Frenchie, who they ask to take them to the Abbey, and he reluctantly agrees. Once there, he takes them into the icebox where he'd placed Victoria's body after stumbling upon it, and upon entering, Frenchie's shocked to find the body sitting up, as he had originally left it lying down. But Father Burke isn't too concerned about this, and continues examining her corpse, eventually finding some kind of key still in her hand, which he retrieves for himself before the 3 give her a proper burial. They then make their way inside the Abbey, and soon come across the abbess, who asks why they're here, and Father Burke explains that they've come on behalf of Rome to inquire about the recent death in her coven, and to gain assurance from the church about the Abbey's safety and well-being, in order for which he'll first need to speak with the sisters. The abbess says he'll have to wait till tomorrow though, as the sisters are about to take their vespers, followed by the great silence that ends mid-morning. So with Burke and Irene having to spend the night in the coven's lodging, Burke tells Frenchie to return home, as they likely won't need him to pick them up for a couple days. On his way back that night though, Frenchie comes across a frightening sight, as in the distance, he sees a nun dragging a noose through the woods. So he follows after her, leading to him being suddenly attacked by the demon nun, but it fortunately fails to inflict much harm on him, and ultimately allows him to escape. Meanwhile, back in the monastery, Burke and Irene, while eating dinner, discuss a series of visions Irene claims she had experienced when she was a child, explaining that although no one vision was the same as another, each left her with the same thought in the end. Mary points the way. This recollection of her past brings back some similar memories for Burke as well, who reveals that, back during the war while he was stationed in France, he was told to investigate a boy with visions named Daniel. And after evaluating the boy, Burke came to the conclusion that Danny was possessed, and so began an exorcism. But unfortunately, although the evil was presumably cast out, Daniel sustained severe injuries during the exorcism and ultimately died days later as a result, leaving Burke filled with guilt ever since. Moving ahead to later that night now, as while the 2 are sleeping, the lodge's radio suddenly begins playing music on its own, waking Burke. Burke then begins seeing and hearing footsteps throughout the lodge before witnessing the unseen person running outside as well. So he follows after them and discovers that it's actually Daniel, who just as Burke catches up to him, then vomits up a snake that begins slithering towards the priest all the way back into an open grave that Burke falls into and becomes trapped within beneath the ground. Fortunately for him though, attached to his casket from above the surface is a bell, which they'd actually spoken about earlier.
It was common practice during the plague and people fear to be buried alive.
So he begins continuously ringing said bell, which eventually manages to catch Sister Irene's attention. Although as she attempts to find him throughout the graveyard, multiple other bells begin ringing as well, momentarily confusing her, but soon she's able to isolate where the real noise is coming from and help dig Father Burke out, who within the grave where he was just trapped, finds and collects a couple of books, believing they may be of use. The following day, he and Irene once again go to the Abbey, but only Sister Irene is permitted to enter. So after Burke gives her the key he'd found earlier, she heads inside while he stays back and begins looking through the books, inside of which he learns of a particular demon named Valak, the Defiler, the Profane, the Marquis of Snakes. Upon entering the chapel, Irene stumbles upon a praying nun, whose attention she attempts to gain, but instead she gets pulled away by another nun named Sister Oana, who informs her that their praying must not be interrupted, as the sisters pray in shifts to maintain constant vigil. Sister Oana then takes Irene to another room to answer whatever questions she may have, beginning with the Abbey's history, with Oana explaining that the Abbey was built by the Duke of St. Carta in the Dark Ages, who'd written countless texts on witchcraft and rituals to call upon the forces of hell, that eventually enabled him to open a gateway, through which an unspeakable evil would then enter their world. But fortunately, the church stormed the castle in time to kill the Duke, as well as seal the gateway using an ancient relic containing the blood of Jesus Christ. And in the aftermath, the church claimed the castle for their own, bringing a start to the nuns' perpetual praying to contain the evil, which worked over the course of multiple centuries until the bombs of war shook the abbey, and the evil found another way to open the gate. The two's conversation is then interrupted by Sister Abigail, who tells Irene she must leave, but since the gates have already closed, Oana says she'll have to stay the night. Back to Father Burke now, who while searching for another way into the abbey, is again met by the abbess, whom he then asks about the key he found in Sister Victoria's hand, but rather than answering the question, she informs him that it's too late and that Sister Irene is lost, before her body suddenly goes limp, prompting Burke to try and check on her by lifting her veil. But this just leads her demonic body to grab his arm, which he's fortunately able to pull away, resulting in her arm being torn apart from her body before she just completely vanishes. Sister Irene, meanwhile, is suddenly woken out of her sleep by a disturbing nightmare, before things then become even more frightening when she notices a nun seated across the room. And this nun appears to be the deceased Sister Victoria, as she momentarily appears behind Irene before leaping out the window. Irene then begins hearing the voice of Sister Victoria calling out to her, so she follows it down the hallway into the door we saw Sister Jessica enter earlier, behind which Irene is met by the demonic entity Valak, appearing in its nun form, who then slowly begins chasing after Irene, but she's ultimately able to get away thanks to some help from Sister Oana, who informs her that they must meet in the chapel, as only prayer will get them through the night. Elsewhere, Father Burke is also suddenly attacked by Valak, but fortunately for him, he's able to gain some help in the form of Frenchie, who'd begun to worry that Burke and Irene may be in danger, so he's now returned wielding a shotgun that he uses to take down this form of the demon. Back to the chapel though, as upon Sister Irene's arrival, she finds Sister Abigail praying rather than Sister Oana, who it turns out is now dead, with her corpse seen lying on the floor beside Abigail, before the other nuns enter the chapel and begin praying alongside Irene. Although this praying proves to be quite difficult as the demon continuously interrupts them, first by launching the nuns outside of Irene all across the room, before then carving a pentagram into Irene's back. But soon enough, Burke and Frenchie are able to make it to the chapel as well, so Irene unlocks the door to let them in. But strangely, when she turns back to the other nuns, they've all vanished, and she quickly realizes that none of them were actually real, but rather just visions. With this abbey having officially proven to no longer be holy, the three now begin to realize that Sister Victoria's apparent suicide earlier was actually a sacrifice to prevent the evil from taking on a human host and entering the world. But although they've completed their investigation, Sister Irene refuses to leave until they've resealed the gateway and contained the evil. So the three make plans to next locate the relic containing the blood of Jesus Christ, which Irene believes may be somewhere in the tunnels to the catacombs, where the gateway is located. But before they move ahead with that, Irene informs Father Burke that she would like to take her vows, as she's now determined that her visions are a miracle of God, to whom she's ready to commit her life. So they take care of that and then move forward with their plan to search throughout the tunnels, within which Father Burke realizes the meaning behind Irene's visions of Mary points the way, upon discovering a statue of Mary literally pointing them in the direction of the door behind which the relic is hidden. So Irene uses the key to open the door and retrieve the relic. Not too long after gaining the possession of the blood of Christ though, the three are once again attacked by Valak, who manages to force them into splitting up, which allows the demon the opportunity to possess Irene. And now, with their new human host, they go to kill Frenchie, but they end up getting a little too close to him, and inadvertently allow him to pour some of Christ's blood onto his hand, which he then smears across their face, forcing it to exit Irene's body. He's then immediately knocked unconscious for his efforts though, while Irene is sent flying across the room and Father Burke is left dealing with the demonic Daniel throwing up snakes, one of which ends up taking a bite out of his eye, so there's no one to help Irene as Valak slowly stalks towards and promptly begins strangling her underwater until she's knocked unconscious. Or so they thought, as upon being raised back up to the surface, Irene spits the blood of Christ onto Valak's face, resulting in the demon being sent back down to hell and the gateway being sealed. Irene still appears to be suffocating to death though, so Frenchie rushes over and gives her mouth to mouth, which works in resuscitating her and leads Irene to ask his real name so she can thank him properly for saving her life, and he reveals it to be Maurice. With Valak presumably defeated, the three are finally able to begin making their way back home, but just as they exit, we see an upside down crucifix starting to appear within Maurice's neck, which then leads to us being taken 20 years in the future during a seminar in Wakefield, Massachusetts, in which two paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren, discuss their encounter with Maurice, who we see had actually been possessed by Valak during their earlier battle. And this seminar we see here was actually first shown in the original Conjuring film and served as the Warrens' first encounter with Valak, although it wouldn't be the last. And that was our recap of The Nun. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful in any way, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And also, make sure to let us know in the comments below what you thought of the film and where you'd rank it amongst the rest of the Conjuring universe. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.